There's a certain peace that comes with being left alone. Some people crave the city, the noise, the crowds. Me? I'd had enough of all that a long time ago. So, I bought myself a lake house, deep enough in the woods that you'd have to mean to find it. The air smelled of pine, the water was crystal clear, and my only real neighbors were the loons that nested nearby. Most folks in town just knew me as Old Jack. They figured I was some retired nobody with a knack for fixing things and a habit of keeping to myself. And that was fine by me. No one needed to know about my past. It was behind me, locked up tight where it belonged. Or at least, that's what I thought. Then the HOA came sniffing around. Now, I don't live in an HOA neighborhood. That's the whole damn point of living out here. But a few miles down the road, some developer built a fancy new subdivision. Lakewood Estates, or some other name that made it sound fancier than it was. The people who moved in were the kind that liked their grass trimmed to exactly 2 inches and their mailboxes all matching. The kind that liked to tell other people what to do. Enter Karen. Her real name was Marcy Alderman, but she was every bit a Karen at heart. HOA president, self-appointed queen of the lake, and the type of woman who probably kept a spreadsheet of how many Christmas lights you were allowed to put up. And, somehow, she got it into her head that my land, my lake house, belonged under her jurisdiction. It started small. A letter in my mailbox. Dear homeowner, it has come to our attention that your property is in violation of HOA regulations. Please remove the unsightly dock and all unapproved structures. I ignored it. Then came another, and another. Then the fines. One day, I was sitting on my porch with my morning coffee when I saw them. A couple of HOA lackeys in khaki shorts and polo shirts, standing at the edge of my driveway like they were about to walk into enemy territory. One had a clipboard. The other had the stiff-backed posture of someone who thought a name tag made them important. I took my time, sipped my coffee, set the mug down real slow before I finally stood. Can I help you boys? Clipboard guy cleared his throat. Sir, we're from the Lakewood Estates Homeowners Association. We've sent multiple notices regarding your property violations. Not part of your HOA. Well, technically, the Lakewood Estates covenant extends to all properties adjacent to the lake, and as per section, not part of your HOA. They exchanged a look. I could tell this wasn't how things usually went for them. Usually, they waved their little rule book and people fell in line. Well, said clipboard guy, shifting tactics. Perhaps you'd be interested in joining voluntarily? We offer excellent benefits. I didn't laugh, but it was a near thing. Get off my land. He bristled. Sir, there's no need to be hostile. I took a step forward, just enough to let them feel it. Not a threat, just a reminder that some people don't respond well to being pushed. The other guy, the one with the name tag, cleared his throat. Maybe we should go. Clipboard guy hesitated, then stiffened. This isn't over, he said, like some 2-bit movie villain. I watched them go, then sat back down and finished my coffee. Should have known that wouldn't be the end of it. The next escalation came about a week later. This time, I wasn't home. I'd gone into town for supplies, and when I got back, I found 3 HOA goons walking around my property like they owned the place. One of them had a tape measure. Another was taking pictures of my dock. I pulled up slow, parking my truck just right to block the driveway. I stepped out, rolling my shoulders, and let the door shut behind me. The guy with the camera noticed me first. He nudged the other 2, and they all turned. Clipboard guy, because of course he was here, tried to smooth things over. Sir, we were just... I didn't let him finish. Get off my land. This is official HOA business. I took another step forward. So is mine. Clipboard guy hesitated. The other 2 shifted uncomfortably. This is your final warning, I said. Next time, you don't walk away. They left. I thought maybe that was the end of it. Maybe they'd figure out I wasn't worth the trouble and move on. I was wrong. A few days later, I woke up to the sound of engines. Multiple. I stepped onto my porch and saw them. A whole damn squad of HOA enforcers. 5, maybe 6 of them. And this time, they weren't just taking pictures. They had bolt cutters, a chainsaw, a goddamn tow truck, positioned to take my boat. Leading them, Marcy Alderman herself. She stood there, arms crossed, looking at me like she was about to have me evicted from my own land. "Jack," she said, her voice full of fake sweetness, "you've ignored every one of our notices. I'm afraid you've left us no choice." I took a slow breath, looked at the chainsaw, the bolt cutters, the men shifting on their feet, waiting for an order. Then I smiled. "All right," I said. "You had your chance." I turned and walked back inside, to the gun safe. I opened the gun safe. The thing about a good safe is that it isn't just about keeping things locked away, it's about keeping them ready. I ran my fingers over cold steel, past weapons that hadn't seen the light of day in years. Some of them, I hoped, never would again. But today wasn't about those. Today was about the shotgun. I lifted it from its place, checked the load, and took my time. If they were still out there by the time I stepped back outside, then they'd made their choice. I stepped onto the porch, gun resting easy in my hands. The air went still. The goons by the boat froze. Clipboard guy looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Even the chainsaw guy hesitated, suddenly uncertain if revving that thing was a good idea. Marcy Alderman, though? Oh, she was a special kind of stupid. She actually scoffed. "Really, Jack?" She folded her arms, her manicured nails tapping against her sleeve. "You're going to threaten us? Over a few HOA regulations." I didn't say a word. Didn't have to. I just stepped off the porch, moving slow, measured. Clipboard guy backed up. So did the one holding the bolt cutters. But Marcy? She stood her ground, lips pressed tight in self-righteous fury. "You think this intimidates me?" she snapped. "We own this lake. This property is under our jurisdiction, whether you like it or not. If you don't comply, we'll have the county sheriff out here so fast." I racked the shotgun. Not a word. Not a threat. Just the sound of it. She shut up real quick. I let the silence stretch, watching them, letting them feel the weight of their mistake. Then I spoke, quiet and even. "You're trespassing. You brought a crew to vandalize my property, and you thought that was going to go well for you." Marcy swallowed. I saw the moment she realized she'd gone too far. But like any true Karen, she doubled down. You wouldn't dare," she said, voice shaking but defiant. "You lay a hand on us, and..." I raised the shotgun. She stumbled back, her goons following suit. Clipboard guy tripped over his own feet. Chainsaw guy abandoned his post entirely, nearly knocking over the tow truck driver in his scramble to get away. And that's when I fired. The dart hit Marcy square in the thigh. She had just enough time to look down, confusion flickering across her face, before her legs gave out. She dropped like a sack of bricks. The others? They didn't get far. The next shot took out chainsaw guy mid-sprint. He flailed, staggered, then face-planted right next to his chainsaw. Clipboard guy turned in time to see me pump another round. He screamed something, maybe a plea, maybe an insult, but it didn't matter. A second later, he was out cold, crumpling into a heap with his precious paperwork fluttering to the ground beside him. Tow truck guy nearly made it to his cab. Nearly. I nailed him just as he reached for the door handle. He slumped against the truck, slid down to the dirt, and fell asleep like a baby. One by one, they all went down. Like a scene from some bizarre nature documentary, predators turned prey, collapsing in the tall grass. And then, silence. I stood in the middle of my property, surrounded by the unconscious bodies of a half-dozen HOA enforcers. The chainsaw beside its owner. The bolt cutters lay abandoned in the grass. The clipboard rested in the dirt like the last, pitiful remains of a failed bureaucracy. It was almost peaceful. I sighed, slinging the shotgun over my shoulder. This was going to be a real pain in the ass to explain. But at least I wouldn't have to explain it to the sheriff. Not when the evidence spoke for itself. I called the sheriff's office from my porch, keeping my voice calm and measured. "Yeah, Sheriff? You might want to send someone out here. Got a bit of a situation." "A situation?" "Yeah." I glanced over at Marcy's crumpled form. "Looks like I caught a few trespassers in the act. Thought you might want to see for yourself." A pause. Then a sigh. "I'll be there in 10. I hung up, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, and waited. This was going to be fun. Sheriff Tom Landry pulled up about 15 minutes later, kicking up a cloud of dust on the gravel road. His cruiser came to a slow stop at the edge of my property, and he stepped out with the wary, tired look of a man who'd seen too much nonsense for one lifetime. I liked Tom. He was old school, practical, no nonsense, and about as allergic to HOA politics as I was. He adjusted his belt, took one look at the scene in front of him, and let out a long, slow whistle. Well, hell, Jack. Morning, Sheriff. I took a sip of my coffee. He walked forward, boots crunching on the dirt, surveying the mess. Clipboard guy was still sprawled on his back, mouth hanging open like a landed fish. Chainsaw guy had one arm flopped over his tool like he died trying to defend it. Marcy was face down in the grass, drooling on her designer blouse. Tom nudged tow truck guy's boot with the tip of his shoe. No response. You kill him? Nah. I gestured with my mug. Tranquilizer rounds. He looked at me, long and hard, then sighed. Of course you have those. Better than real bullets. Tom muttered something under his breath, then crouched next to Marcy, rolling her onto her back. Her eyelids fluttered, but she was still out cold. Well, he grunted, I can't say I've ever had an entire HOA hit squad show up unconscious at a crime scene before. First time for everything. He stood, dusting off his hands. Mind explaining what the hell happened? I shrugged. Trespassing. Attempted destruction of property. Theft in progress. I nodded toward the tow truck. Guess they thought they could roll up and take my boat. Maybe my dock, too. Tom exhaled sharply through his nose. And instead, you put him down like a bunch of rabid dogs. I raised my mug in a toast. Justice. He shook his head, but didn't argue. Instead, he pulled his radio from his belt. Dispatch, this is Sheriff Landry. Gonna need a couple units out at the Lakewood property. Got about 6 suspects unconscious on scene. Bring the paramedics, too. Don't think we'll need him, but better safe than sorry. A crackle of static. Then, come again, Sheriff? You heard me, Lisa. Just get him out here. Another pause. Then, 10-4. Units en route. Tom clipped the radio back onto his belt, then turned to me. You got video? I nodded. Cameras all over. He grunted. Figures. You want to send me that footage? Already queued up. I pulled my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen a few times. Check your inbox. A second later, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, skimmed the preview, then let out a sharp laugh. Marcy's gonna love this. It took about 20 minutes for the backup units to arrive. In that time, Marcy and her cronies started waking up, one by one. Clipboard guy groaned first, rolling onto his side with a pitiful whimper. Chainsaw guy sat up slowly, rubbing his face like he'd been hit by a train. Tow truck guy made a confused noise, then blinked blearily at the sheriff's car. And then there was Marcy. She came to with a shudder, blinking rapidly as she tried to piece together what had happened. When she finally registered where she was, flat on her back in my yard, surrounded by cops, she shot upright like a spooked cat. What happened? Tom crouched beside her, resting his arms on his knees. Well, Marcy, I was going to ask you that. She blinked at him, then at me, then at her clipboard squad, who were still flopped around like downed cattle. Then her eyes landed on the shotgun in my hands, and her face went pale. Oh my God. He shot us. Tom sighed. Tranquilizer rounds. That's illegal. He arched a brow. No, it ain't. Her mouth opened and closed, her brain short-circuiting. But he assaulted us. No, Marcy. Tom stood, dusting off his knees. From what I saw on the footage, you and your boys broke onto private property, tried to steal a man's boat, and then got exactly what you deserved. She gaped at him. You're taking his side? I'm taking the law's side. He gestured at the tow truck, the bolt cutters, the chainsaw. Everything I need to arrest you is lying right here in the grass. Her face went red. I am the law. I'm the HOA president. This land falls under our jurisdiction. Tom took a deep breath. I could see him counting to 10 in his head. Marcy, he said, with the patience of a saint, you do not own this land. Your HOA does not extend here. And even if it did, none of that would give you the right to break in, vandalize, and attempt grand theft boat. Marcy floundered, looking around as if hoping someone might back her up. Clipboard guy was still on the ground, groaning. Chainsaw guy wasn't even fully awake. You're lucky Jack here used tranquilizers instead of real rounds, Tom continued. Because if it had been me standing on that porch, and I saw 6 people rolling up with bolt cutters and a chainsaw. He shook his head. Well, let's just say you'd be leaving in a coroner's van instead of a squad car. Marcy finally seemed to grasp how deep a hole she'd dug for herself. Her lips pressed tight, hands curling into fists. I could practically see the steam rising from her ears as she struggled for a way out. She found none. Tom turned to his deputies, who were now stepping out of their cruisers. Cuff M, he ordered. Charge M with trespassing, attempted theft, and destruction of property. The deputies moved in, securing cuffs on every single one of them. Marcy tried to argue, but Tom just turned and walked away. I watched as they were loaded into the cars, Marcy sputtering indignantly all the way. When the last door slammed shut, Tom turned to me. You pressing charges? Damn right I am. He nodded. Figured. We stood there for a moment, watching as the HOA enforcers, now criminals, were driven away. Then Tom clapped me on the shoulder. Next time, he said, maybe just call me before you put a whole squad of idiots to sleep. I grinned. No promises. He sighed. Yeah, didn't think so. Then he got in his car, tipped his hat, and drove off, leaving me alone with my coffee, my boat, and my perfectly intact lake house. The sound of sheriff's cruisers faded into the distance, leaving behind the quiet hum of the lake and the gentle rustling of the trees. I let out a long breath, finally letting myself relax. The idiots were gone. My property was intact. And best of all, Marcy Alderman and her clipboard cronies were heading straight for a holding cell, where they'd have plenty of time to think about their life choices. Still, there was work to do. I grabbed a tarp from my shed, rolled up their abandoned tools, and tossed them into the back of my truck. Chainsaw. Check. Bolt cutters? Check. Clipboard full of fines that meant exactly nothing? Check. I figured I'd hold on to all of it, maybe donate it to the town's annual yard sale. Then I walked down to the dock, checked my boat, and gave it a once-over. No damage. The HOA thugs hadn't had time to do anything before their forced nap. I patted the hull. You're safe, girl. A couple of hours later, after a good lunch and another cup of coffee, I got a call. Sheriff Landry. I picked up. Tom. Jack. He sighed. Marcy made bail. I smirked. That was fast. Yeah, well, apparently some of her HOA friends pooled their money together. Looks like she's lawyering up. I chuckled. Of course she is. Don't worry, though. I've got a solid case against her. The security footage alone is enough to bury her in charges. I leaned back in my chair, staring out over the lake. Think she's dumb enough to try something again? A pause. Then Tom let out a slow exhale. Jack. Marcy is dumb enough to try again. I nodded, tapping my fingers against the armrest. Figured. I spent the next couple of days reinforcing my property. Not because I was scared. No, I dealt with worse than Marcy Alderman in my lifetime, but because I wanted to be prepared. I set up additional cameras, ones with live streaming directly to my phone. Motion detectors at the edge of my property. Even a few surprise countermeasures. Nothing harmful. Just enough to make the next idiot who stepped foot on my land regret it immediately. And of course, I kept the shotgun close. Marcy might have been arrested, but I knew her type. She wasn't just some busybody with too much time on her hands. She was power-hungry. And power-hungry people don't know when to quit. Sure enough, the next evening, I spotted something on my cameras. A black SUV creeping down the road. Slower than a casual drive. Too cautious, too deliberate. It rolled past my driveway once. Then again. Then a third time. I sipped my coffee, watching from the porch, and shook my head. Oh, Marcy, I muttered. You never learn. The black SUV rolled past my driveway a fourth time before finally stopping. I stayed where I was on the porch, rocking slowly in my chair, shotgun resting across my lap. Not raised, not threatening, just there. A friendly little reminder. The driver's side door opened, and out stepped none other than Marcy Alderman. She looked different this time. Less polished. Less in control. Her hair was a little messier, her clothes not as crisp. The mugshot experience must have shaken her. Good. But what really stood out? The anger in her eyes. She slammed the door, marched toward my property, and stopped just shy of the driveway, as if stepping onto my land again might cause her to spontaneously combust. Smart. I didn't move. Just took another sip of coffee. Evening, Marcy. She crossed her arms. I could sue you, you know. I exhaled through my nose. Uh-huh. You assaulted me. Nope. You. She faltered, then scowled. You drugged me. Tranquilized. I took another sip. Big difference. She huffed. You humiliated me. You ruined me. My reputation. I held up a hand. Let me stop you right there, Marcy. Your reputation ruined itself the second you tried to steal my boat, my lake, and my land. Her jaw clenched. I was only enforcing community standards. I set my coffee down with a sharp clink. Marcy, I said, voice even. You and I both know that's bullshit. Her lips pressed tight. She glanced at the shotgun in my lap, then at the security cameras mounted on my porch. She swallowed. But still, she held her ground. I came here to make you an offer. I arched a brow. Oh. She straightened, as if reclaiming whatever dignity she thought she had left. You dropped the charges against me, and in return, I'll make sure the HOA leaves you alone. I chuckled. Marcy, you don't have that kind of power. Her nostrils flared. I do if I say I do. That, I said, leaning forward slightly, is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. She stiffened, fists clenched at her sides. I am giving you a chance, Jack. I stood. Not aggressively. Not threateningly. Just enough to remind her that I was bigger, stronger, and not the kind of man to be bullied. She took an involuntary step back. Marcy, I said, keeping my voice calm. This is your final warning. You and your HOA goons will stay off my property. No letters. No fines. No bullshit. You so much as step foot on my land again, and I promise you, you will regret it. She swallowed. Her eyes darted between me and the shotgun, calculating. Then, finally, she huffed. This isn't over. I smirked. It is for you. She turned sharply and stomped back to her SUV and peeled out so fast she kicked up a storm of dust behind her. I stood there for a while, watching the road, listening to the silence she left behind. Then I sat back down, picked up my coffee, and went right back to enjoying my evening. Marcy didn't come back after that. Oh, I'm sure she wanted to. I'm sure she sat in her little HOA meetings, stewing in her own self-importance, trying to think of some way to get back at me. But she didn't. Because deep down, she finally understood. She'd lost. And some battles? You just don't fight twice. I don't know what she told her HOA buddies. Maybe she spun some story about how she chose to leave me alone, how it was her idea all along. Maybe she just moved on to harassing some other poor neighbor about their mailbox color. Didn't matter to me, because my lake house was mine, and no clipboard-carrying, power-hungry Karen was ever going to take it away. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you're watching from, and if you liked it, and we'll see you next time.